Hey guys, I am here to talk about Devil May Cry. Um, this pretty much is this pretty much is the best action game ever made. I don't know. It's fun to meme about, but it honestly is a very good action game. This is really the beginning of a whole a standard and the new bar for action games, at least in the 2000s. This was just something that people could not compete with, and it was something that was just a new type of game and a new type of action game that really just dominated the 2000s. In the sense that it just was the standard, and this was the beginning of the Devil May Cry series. And I know it's very precious and close to a lot of people. It definitely has that early 2000s Matrix-ish vibes, especially in the intro. But what makes Devil May Cry such a classic game? Obviously there is Dante, the character himself, who has a bunch of attitude, and that really wouldn't be realized, I think, really fleshed out until Devil May Cry 3, really. But here we get a hint of who he is, what he's like, and what his deal is. And the entire presentation, of course, the rule of Devil May Cry is the rule of cool. It's the fact that he's I go around killing demons, no big deal, babe. That's Dante's personality, and eating pizza as well. So what is it about Devil May Cry that makes it such a classic game? I would say that it's just the tight controls, the focus more so on gameplay than, the story, and just a sense of progression from the player, and the fact that a lot of it really relies on your skills. You do get certain upgrades to your health and magic via your red orbs, but a lot of it is really still based on you. The fact that you start with things like ebony and ivory, you get different weapons like the Ifrit gauntlets and stuff like that, and the shotgun, and I think different kinds of firearms as well. I think it's a grenade launcher in this one. They essentially are, all part of a host of very, overly cool, overly interesting kind of devices and mechanics. And mechanically speaking, Devil May Cry is actually pretty simple. Once you lock onto the enemy, you can sidestep and move forward. I've heard people who have played this game for years and have found like new techniques by accident that they didn't think was possible. For example, simple things like if you keep side rolling and fire the grenade launcher, you don't have to wait for the recoil or the reload. Essentially, no, it's more of a recoil animation, and you can kind of spam that faster. This introduces basic combos. Your 1, 2, 3. Or your 1, 2 pause, and then kind of million stab, the stinger, and all that good stuff. And the basic story of Devil May Cry, at least Devil May Cry 1, is basically like, hey, the evil king Mundus has returned, and I'm pretty sure that's Latin for world. It's a very and you have to go to this island to basically find in this castle, and everything's based on gaudy architecture, actually, and it's very simple. You just go to the island, find the demon, and defeat him, and that's pretty much it. It's a very simple, straightforward plot that gets much more interesting as the series goes on. The one thing I was very unaccustomed to and did not like when I first played Devil May Cry is just the verticality of the game. You jump very, very high and very kind of stiffly in one direction. You don't have a lot of control over your movement in the air, but you can jump very high and very vertically, and sometimes you can double jump by either air hiking once you get it, or jumping off part of the scenery or a wall or something. But I found it very frustrating that I'd want to go quickly, and the only way is really to stinger your way across the room. But again, this is the beginning of a lot of the major mechanics in the game, and a lot of the things have not changed. Every game they release, it feels like it's building off the last one in terms of new mechanics, except for probably Devil May Cry 2, which is a different kettle of fish. And so this is the game that introduced the whole thing, like, throwing up enemies in the air, juggling them with your pistols, mixing up every combo until you get a nice smooth transition, into all sorts of different combos until you get something really, really cool. Oh my god, I remember this platforming and the beginning of the game, like the vertical ledges, and there's parts where there's platforming, and that's honestly a massive pace killer. The platforming sections in any Devil May Cry game, I think, are just absolutely atrocious because it's not designed around that, it's designed around combat. It also is reassuring if you're ever stuck on these games, because they are pretty difficult at certain parts, is that if you collect enough red orbs, you can always just upgrade your health or your magic or whatnot. So you're never really truly stuck. You just have to grind essentially in a certain level and then come back to where you're having troubles. It's interesting though, I should mention the history of this game. So originally, I think they bring it up somewhere in the anime series or something for Devil May Cry, but originally Dante was going to be a Resident Evil character called Tony Redgrave, and it's kind of funny how you can see the horror aspects of Resident Evil kind of play into this kind of genre, and I always found that really, really super interesting, because the kind of cycle that I wasn't sure if they were aware of in Resident Evil games is you're scared of the enemy at first, and you kind of go through the motions of getting stronger and realizing you can face your fears, and then once you can face your fears, you can take gleeful joy in kind of going Rambo and destroying with more efficiency this thing that you despise, that is anti-human and bad. But yeah, it's interesting here that I forget that when you start the game, you have Sparta's sword, basically, or Force Edge, I believe it's called, and it's only until around mission 4 you actually get Alaster, which becomes Dante's signature weapon for the rest of the series, if I recall correctly. But yeah, they kind of, with Devil May Cry, they skipped straight to the part where you get to be super cool and massacre the demons of your imagination, rather than having the fear aspect. They just kind of skipped that part, and yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's such a simple mechanical game, but it is really, really well made, and even today, I think it's worth playing just to see what it's like. It can get a little bit getting used to, because again, like Resident Evil, it kind of almost feels like it's still stuck on tank controls, the way that Dante will move when you're locked in, and it's really odd that way. That being said, though, you kind of get accustomed to the status meter or the style meter, and it's really cool to see the beginning of these things. But yeah, no, the story itself, you're in this medieval castle. And again, it's very much based on, there are some rooms that are just normal medieval style, but then there are rooms that are very gaudy looking. They have like the organ room, for example. And I never really enjoyed the environments in Devil May Cry games. I don't know why. Like, it's kind of like they just kind of feel like they got in the way of like getting me to the combat. And of course, you even have things in here like, keys for locked doors. I mean, it's so close to Resident Evil's DNA, but if someone did not tell me that, I wouldn't have put those two together, because it's completely opposite in terms of its action-oriented style. It's funny now that I can even think of it, the blood effects on the enemies are actually very similar to what you'd see on the zombies in Resident Evil. And the main, a gimmick or aspect of this game is you want to basically hit the enemy as much as you can without getting hit. It's kind of funny. I even forgot you don't even have your devil trigger when you start the game, and you have to actually unlock that and use that as much as possible. And really, the bread and butter of these games is being able to pull off crazy combos you see in montages and stuff. It's one of these games too where I feel, I mean, I'm not super skilled at action games, but I do feel like after a certain while I get really good at certain enemies. Like I think the shadow enemy was something that I actually felt really good mastering. You know, eventually at some point you can dodge all of his moves and predict what he's going to do. The recurring boss in this game, Neo Angelo, is also very fun to fight because he'll have 3 separate versions of himself, and you get better at each one as you go through the game. There are other different bosses like Griffin, for example, is one I'd bring up because it's something that feels really difficult at first, but once you figure out the boss's pattern, it's actually really not that hard. And it feels really good to master a boss. Of course, every mission you're going to get your clear time, your orbs, and your style ranking, which will give you an overall ranking from D to S. I also have to say one thing that stands out for Devil May Cry are the enemy designs. They are very unique. Also, I think the shop is interesting because I think the shop changes throughout every game. And here it's like the goddess of time that's holding like a hourglass over her head and she has a lion's head. I'm pretty sure it's almost different in every game. Something I just realized that maybe I should look into exactly how it's changed. But yeah, these opening sequences in the game are super fun because you kind of get used to the mechanics. You fight marionettes for a lot of the beginning, and then it moves on to obviously much more complicated and difficult enemies. You also have a taunt button that'll increase your style meter, or hold it at least. You have different items you can pick up and spend your red orbs on, which are, you know, the money component of this game, which are dropped from killing enemies and killing bosses. You have blue orbs that expand your health. You have yellow orbs that basically give you a revive in the middle of a battle, so you don't have to go back to the beginning of the level. And, you know, this is kind of a game that is meant to be played multiple times through because, you know, you basically stack and keep all of your rewards. I've never really had the sense or impulsion to do that. I feel like once I beat a game, I beat it in a game, and if I really enjoyed it, I'll beat it again. But this is kind of a game that honestly is a little bit frustrating, and every Devil May Cry game is kind of meant to be that. You know, it's a fine line between challenging and frustrating, but it's so cool to pull off super cool combos and moves and dodge and take out the enemies. And I would say this is still extremely playable today, even for other, you know, Devil May Cry fans. It's still worth playing. It's funny, I think when you start with the Force Edge, you're actually locked out of certain combos that only the Alaster has. And there's even crazy things where, you know, the Alaster will it'll have different Devil Trigger movesets you have to unlock. So there's one thing, which I think is pretty much the cheapest one, where it basically it lets you fly in the air and shoot lightning bolts from the sky. It's funny. This whole game is based around what if you had like the super cool, badass bad guy powers, and it's funny because one of Capcom's old games called Demon Crest is literally exactly what this game is. It's literally you play as the demon, you know, that the world fears, fighting another demon. And the whole kind of concept and idea behind Devil May Cry is, what if you had all the boss's moves? If you had all of the super cool, crazy moves that you were jealous of the enemy having, that you wish you had? And because you're an anti-hero, you're like half demon, half human, it gives you an excuse to have all of those crazy cool powers. And so it's the rule of cool. If it looks cool, it doesn't matter how dumb it is or how unrealistic it is, Capcom is going to make it, and I love them for that. It's also funny too, I remember I replayed this game a while back, and what really struck me was the fact that Dante has this big cocky attitude in the beginning of the game, and then you just don't hear him talk until you fight Phantom, which is the giant spider boss. And it kind of took me aback, like, oh right, this guy has a personality. And it's funny that that's something that they kept very toned down in the early stages of gaming. Like, oh, we don't want to emphasize our character or our story, we want to focus on gameplay. That's what gamers want. And that is true, but Dante's personality became a huge, I think, part of Devil May Cry's identity. I think one enemy type I do want to just highlight and point out is the what do you call them? The scissors, or the Sin Scissors. They are great designs and very fun to fight, and you kind of figure out each one has a certain style. Each one has basically, you take out the enemy in the air, you're using a shotgun and helm diver. Oh god, these the animations when you choose a different handgun, they do this big explosion. Everything in the premier game of a series is everything's big and bad and weighty and cool and stuff, and everything just has so much style to it. I remember when I first played it, I was very frustrated though that I couldn't grasp the controls really. It was very difficult and very different for me. But once you kind of get your head around it, it's a lot of fun because you kind of know what you're doing and the scope of what to expect from the enemy. I think one of the scariest, honestly, designs in this game is probably the boss Nightmare, because he'll have this black goo that'll bring you down to the underworld. It's very interesting. I don't know. And it kind of everything fades to black, and they have all of these different effects that go on the screen, and it's this black sludge, and you feel like you're always drowning. It's definitely not a scary game, but it definitely is inspired by scary games. Also, one thing I like and perhaps dislike about these games is that there's never really a clear continuity between the levels and areas. Sometimes you'll return to them sometimes, or have to backtrack. It feels like the world is kind of disconnected from each other, and things just kind of happen. It's there's no really rhyme or reason. You're just like, okay, go here, and you can't really backtrack unless you load in a different level for the game. Eventually the story does kind of pick up about Dante's mom and his lineage and his relationships, and who Trish is, who Mundus is. And there is, even though it's a base bone story, it's serviceable enough that I think you could call it decent. And also there are just some voice lines in this game that are just exemplary, let's call them, that are somewhat meme worthy. The one thing I'm always not sure how to feel about these games is the fact that you can use multiple weapons, and it's like, okay, well, which one am I supposed to use? And it's kind of implied you should get good with all of them, but even if you did get good with all of them, you're gonna revert back to whatever combo, whatever weapon you feel most comfortable with. So I don't know how to change that up. I mean, obviously in the later games you can quick swap different weapons on the fly and do more advanced combos, but how it is right now, it's kind of restrictive. But yeah, Dante's design and really his Devil Trigger designs and the designs in this series are just really, really amazing and really cool. And I don't know, I just love them. I think they're really, really neat. But yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. You have your Devil Trigger, you have your, basic boss fights. You have your, enemies. You have your different weapons. You have your special Devil Trigger moves that are deplete your whole Devil Trigger when you do a certain thing. Yeah, and you kind of have the a really good epic final boss fight where you have a part where you're flying towards a guy and then you fight him on land and whatever. Lots of fun. Oh yeah, there are also throughout the game there are secret special missions where you can basically fight enemies in a certain time limit or of a certain style, and when you beat them, you usually unlock a fragment of a blue orb, and that'll count towards your overall Devil Trigger. The other thing I have to say about this game is that the sound design is phenomenal. They're just certain sounds when you hear the Devil May Cry menu when you boot it up for the first time. When you select certain things, you just know it's such a specific and unique vibe and sound that it really is ingrained in your brain. Anyway, guys, I think that's all I can really say about it. It's super cool. Super fun game. It's the Devil May Cry experience you've known it for, and yeah, it's a classic. What else can I say? Belongs in a museum. I'll see you guys later. Bye.